Okay, welcome to Talakeiola podcast. This is Ikuna Tawake. I'll be the producer and the host of this channel. And of this particular segment, today we have two guests with us. We have, to my left, we have Muti Tauteoli. And to my right, we have Fahina Pasi. And so just for like a quick introduction, I'm going to let each of them have a few minutes to kind of tell you a little bit about themselves. And then we'll kind of move on after that to kind of talk about how each one of them found their party and how their beliefs align with their party's values and belief systems. So I'll turn the time over to Muti if you want to.
Ladies first.
Oh, ladies first? All right. Such a gentleman.
All right.
Come
All
with the
right,
suit.
whatever.
All right, so Farina, if you guys want to start.
Okay, and just,
Yeah. If you want to just share just a little bit about yourself, like
Okay.
what you do and yeah, like what your interests are, I guess.
All right,
Just want
okay.
like the viewers to kind of be able to get to know you.
who I am. All right, well, I'm Fahina Pasi. I was born in Tonga Tapu, in Tatakamutonga, Tonga. Moved to California. Well, actually, we moved to Utah because my father was hired as
California. You moved to California.
No, we moved to Hawaii. He doesn't know because he was born in California. But we moved to Hawaii in 1960. My father came in 61 because he was missionary labor for the Polynesian Cultural Center. And then we came in 62, the rest of the family, myself and my mom. And then we were there until the Polynesian Cultural Center opened, and then in 1963, and then we moved from there in 1965 to California. So that's basically where I grew up, was in California, and then moved here to, what do you call this place, Utah, in 1990, because I was married to a guy. His name is Alapuku Pasi, and his parents were here, and they agreed to watch my children while I went back to school. So came here, went to school up at the U, yay, U. Red power, and got my bachelor there and also my master's degree at the University of Utah. And currently I work as the executive director for the National Tongan American Society, which is a nonprofit organization that helps with various things in health, civic engagement, school programs for our Pacific, well, most especially the Tongan community and Pacific Islander community.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, and just as a quick thing. So which party do you align with most?
And I align most with the Democratic Party.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Vaina. Muti, we'll turn time over to you.
You bet. My name is Moses Muti Tauteoli, and I was born in Nuku'alofa, Tonga in 1968. And from Ha'ateiho, Tonga, my parents brought us here in 1972 to Salt Lake City by way of Laie, Hawaii. We were there for a number of months as my father came here and worked for a year to earn the funds to bring the family here from Hawaii. And so basically this has been home since 1972, about 48 years. And I attended Arizona State University and got a degree there, and then went to medical school here at the University of Utah in 96 to 2000, and that's when I first met Fahina there. She was working in the dean's office, the dean of the medical school, and so my interest in politics began. I've always taken notice of politics since I was a young kid. Started with President Carter, and I thought he was a great man. I thought he was a kind man, and of course, as a young kid, that's all you look at. Hey, that guy's nice, or he's not so nice, and so I really liked him, and I didn't understand the two-party system at the time, and as I grew older, I remember vividly Ronald Reagan when he was shot. I was sitting in class that day, and with the attempted assassination, and so that day I still remember vividly to this day. I was in junior high, as I mentioned, and so then as I was serving my mission in Texas, that's when I really started to pay more attention, and at the time, of course, we're not supposed to watch TV, but when we go to restaurants, I would see the Oliver North hearings. Some of you might know about what happened with Oliver North back then, and it was during the Reagan administration. So I would pay attention to that, got off my mission, came home, went to college, and really, really enjoyed politics. I started to read a lot about it, and just to try and figure out. I always felt I leaned more Republican, but I really needed to know exactly why I was leaning Republican, and so that's after a year of being home from my mission, that's when I really solidified myself and identified with the Republican Party.
Awesome, thank you. And I guess, like, kind of to your point, the whole point of this podcast really is to, I guess, inform everybody who's listening. It's like we're neither left nor right. Obviously, each and every one of us has a bias, and if you can't tell by my hat, I have a bias.
Oh my goodness!
But but the idea is
we'll
of
take
this.
Him out back after.
Let me take his hat off.
But the idea of the podcast is, like, you can believe whatever you want, but we want to, like, arm people with the information that they need to go out and make an informed vote, not just for this election only, but for local elections or whatever it may be. So we have two prominent people here who can kind of give you their points of view on how they vote, give you their points of view on what they believe and how their parties align with it. So again, I'll kind of turn the time over to each one of you. I don't know if you want to continue with the ladies first gesture.
Whichever.
Oh, okay.
Men first now.
Quality.
Sure.
Equality.
But so yeah, I guess Muti, we'll start with you, and I guess what we're gonna kind of do here for just this short segment is we want to just give, like, a little bit of a brief history about what you guys understand about how the Republican Party started and about how the Democratic Party started, but most importantly, like, how that influences you in your beliefs, like why you aligned with them, or if that has, like, maybe there were some hurdles for you to get over concerning your party's origin story. But yeah, we'll just kind of move on from there. But Muti, I'll let you take it away.
Sure, you bet. There's a long version and there's a short version, and I'll stick to the short version. But the two major parties that we have today, the Democratic and the Republican Party, you trace their history, and they both stem from our founding fathers. And when it comes to the Republican Party, that party, you first had the Federalists at the time of before America became a country. You still had the unions and the 13 unions in the country, and so the Constitution hadn't been ratified yet, and so those Federalists would later become the Whig Party, which is a party that had carried over from England, where they had the Whig Party in England. But that Whig Party would later become the Republican Party in 1854. And the reason why the Republican Party was formed was to help prevent the expansion of slavery into the western states. At the time, I think it was about 1860 that you had about 33 states, and 18 of those states were the free states, whereas 15 of those 33 were the slave states. And so even before, as it was formed, the Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln would become the first Republican president of the United States. And even before he took office in 1861, you already had 7 states that had seceded the what was it, the Union? Would it be it was the at the time,
Yeah.
So, and even after he had taken office, you had 4 more states that left, departed. And so those 11 states would become the initial states to represent the Confederates in the Civil War. And we all, I think most of us understand the Civil War, what it was about. It was a war here between the Union, the free states, and the states that supported the slave states. And it was all over the institution of slavery.
Yeah, and I think that like a lot of people don't really know that the Republican Party was, they were at a disagreement. Like before when you mentioned the Whigs, that was the whole reason that they formed the Republican Party is because they couldn't decide.
Yeah.
There was like half of them who were like, no, we should keep our slaves, and the other half were like, no, we should probably free them. But
Yes.
yeah, so that'd be like one of my gripes, I guess, with the Republican Party was the indecisiveness, and I guess we can kind of see that happening now. But yeah, did you have anything else like anything, I guess, like issues that you have with like the Republican history or the platforms, I guess?
The platforms.
Yeah,
So would you
so,
like
like-
me to give the platforms
Yeah, so I guess-
of the
Yeah, a
Republican
couple,
Party?
maybe just give a couple, 2 or 3 that are for you that are
Sure,
Yeah.
for you.
sure. I guess I would think, in terms of helping our Pacific Islanders understand and identify more with the or in decision making, whether they identify with the Democratic platform or the Republican platform. For me, there are many issues that we vary in between the two parties. I think when it comes to the Pacific Island people, number one to me is that the Republican Party were conservatives, and the word conserve means that you're protecting something of importance from being harmed or destroyed. And so, in terms of social or religious conservatives, one thing that I found for myself that I identified with the Republicans is that they, in their social platforms, they have a tie to the Christian foundation, and there's a desire to uphold and preserve God in country. And you see that when in our fight for our freedom for religion, and there's some holdbacks. There's some criticisms about our stand as Republicans because it conflicts with the gay community, and it conflicts, in, for example, gay marriage, and it conflicts with abortion. Whereas with Christians, we like to say that we uphold the traditional Christian values, which are, against gay marriage or against abortion, which are two of the hot topics currently. I think and that's something that we can dive into, as we discuss some of the current issues. But another part of the Republican platform is that we believe in regulating our immigration system. Making sure that we have closed borders, that people are coming in legally, and that's something that I really appreciate with our current president, because we need to close our borders. We can't have a country with open borders. Otherwise, we'd be the only country in the world with open borders. And I believe when I speak to any other Republicans, in terms of our views and with migrating here, foreigners migrating here, this is a great country. This is the best country in the world. And even for us as islanders, when we in Tonga, we grow up and we're like, boy, if we could get to America, because it's the land of opportunity. It's the land of the American dream. And we understand that to realize that we have to come here and work. But we also realize, and we're accustomed to it, that you have to have proper documentation to come here legally. And so those are regulations that we stand for. Let's, allow people to come here, and this is America. It's for anyone and everyone, but do so legally. And so that's one of the platforms that I think the Polynesians or Pacific Islanders would identify with.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think I agree with all your points, especially like here in Utah. I feel like gay marriage and abortion is kind of like a big topic,
Yeah.
Especially among the Polynesian community, because generally, if you're not even Mormon, you're Christian. Like I think it's something like the island of Tonga is like 98% or something like that. They're like 98% Christian. But yeah, I think that's a great point you made.
And those are topics I will probably be discussing, because there's a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
I'm sure Fahina has,
Oh yeah,
plenty to say about it
I'm
as
sure
well.
she's waiting. She's got her glasses and everything ready. Yeah, but Fahina, we'll turn the time to you. Just like your brief history with like an understanding of the Democratic Party, and and then I guess kind of like my dad was saying, like, and then if you kind of want to go on to like how you found the Democratic Party, and then how you align yourself with it, and how your beliefs align with their beliefs, and yeah, just
Okay.
how you got
I'm
there.
not going to be as versed as Mo there, because he seems like he loves politics. I, on the other hand, I don't really like politics.
Yeah.
No, you're good. I again,
And
this is
so-
like the idea of
but-
having a
Right.
civil conversation.
But I'm glad he
Yeah.
brought the history there of as far as the Republicans, because I had to read up on the history of Democrat, a little bit for that. But it seemed to me that the Democrat Party is, from what I understand, is the oldest party here in the U.S. It started in 1795 or something like that, with George Washington, and you mentioned the Federalist, and it went from there to being to the Republican.
Yeah, it was like the Democratic
Democrat
Republic.
Republics,
So you
and
had
to
the
the
Democratic
Whigs.
Republicans.
Yeah, then the Whigs and the
you
what
had the
have you.
Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and
Right. And then
right.
what was really funny to me when I read up on the history of the Democrat is that things went back and forth. All of a sudden they were super supportive of superpowers of the federal government to have all power. And then all of a sudden they split, and some people didn't want, less power from the government. Then they split into different, positions, and then they went. Then of course it came down to the slavery, and then there was a whole, the Southern Democrats were pro-slavery, and the Northern one were not, or the other way, something. They were anti. Slavery, so that caused a commotion and everything. But it was really interesting to see everything go back and forth as the Democratic Party was growing and things like that. But when I go back and when I think of the very first person that kind of influenced, well, not the very first, but the president that kind of influenced my thought was President Kennedy. And I just thought, of course, the assassination, all of that. And so I just always admired him, just didn't know why. I just always felt that President Kennedy.
But you weren't living at the time. You just heard about it.
No,
Right?
I lived at the time. I was born in
But
1957.
then you're giving your age. Then.
I
I was
just
trying to
looked-
help you.
Thank you.
I heard about it.
No, man, I'm going to claim all 63 years.
Wow, you look great.
Thanks, Ro.
Great.
But the fact that that to me, listening to him and seeing him and what he stood for, I think for me that was like the point that I thought, you know what, that's the kind of mind frame that I have. Because for me it almost seemed like his background, he came from, rich folks and all that kind of stuff, but yet his mind was about helping people in need, helping people that, bringing justice, social justice. It was about helping people get jobs. It was about helping the poor. It was about helping, and I related to all of that.
Yeah.
Now I want to cry.
One of the things.
Well, you've always been that way.
I know.
You know,
I know.
you've
I always get
always
emotional
wanted to
about
help.
things.
No, I mean helping
Oh,
people.
exactly.
And, and so I can see, why you.
Yeah, and
identify
that's
with-
kind of like what I tied into with that is
Kennedy.
the fact that is the fact that I want to help I want to be like that dude, helping people that need help. And then of course, not only helping people, but then I saw that that was my community. That was me. That was our family. That was our relatives. That was this guy is wanting to help us. And you come into America, and of course there was racism going on, and of course to this day it's still going on, and everything. To me, as I learned about the Republicans, in my mind, it was all business, and it was everything that was about, and of course there's some, I'm losing some, there's some things that I just chose to look probably at the negative side of things. It was all pro-business. It was all the big guys that were making
Sure.
trillions of dollars. They're the ones that's benefiting. Everything is packed up to help them. And the Democrats are the one that are kind of like, yeah, let's get some social stuff in, let's get Social Security, let's get some Medicare, let's take care of the folks that are not able to take care of themselves, which is the majority of America. 1 million people and $1 trillion businesses and stuff like that. That's like probably 1%, if most 10%, if it even gets that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like how I got into identifying myself with the Democrat, is because I feel like that's the position, or that's the party that, but then when I look further into other things, they're also great too. Like you look at the Libertarians, you look at the Utah Unions or something like that, and then you look into the Green folks, and the they all have, but they're all. And what I totally really understand about all of the different parties is that really, what it really boils down to is that everybody wants to except the big business people, and then those people that are trying to put policies into place that benefits them, where you can see they're paying, we people that are not making any kind of money have to pay all our taxes, but if you make $250,000 and over, your tax is like less.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, really? So that in itself, I'm like, okay, that's why the Republicans need to be slapped. At least the policy
Hey, no
makers.
calls for violence. We have plenty of that going on right now. We don't need any more.
No, this is a Tongan slap.
Like a slap in the back of the head.
Yeah, right.
Well, is that a bowl for some kava? Maybe.
No, really, we
No,
need a
that's
little
just
bit
for
of that.
show.
Get some of
This is
that.
actually, the bowl represents decorum.
Right.
When you're in the circle, the kava circle, there is a decorum. And so we put that there as a reminder to guests and everybody that we keep that decorum.
Yes.
Kava is very important. But, to what you guys are saying, we got to remember that there are differences. Big government, small government, right? Entitlements, non-entitlements. The Republicans look at, if you start big business, that money trickles down, right? So there are different philosophies between the two parties economically. Like, Vahina, what you said about, kind of what most Democrats feel is that, it's all about money. But it is a capitalist system. And that's basically what made America what it is right now in the world, is because it is based on capitalism, creativity, and people going after their dreams and stuff. So there is room for that, but there's also room for what you're talking about, serving other people and things like that.
Sure.
And that's the balance, right? How do we balance the democratic concept of reaching out through entitlements, as well as at the same time taking care of our economy via generating income? Because if you think about it, companies that are out there hiring millions of people, they have a job and they work.
But
Well,
one of
and
the things
they-
one of the things that I think is, like, for an example, some of the people in the Democratic Party is trying to push to have that minimum wage go up to 15. Okay, and oftentimes there is that thought, okay, they're hiring millions of people at $7.50 or $10 or whatever. But I think the bottom line is, and the reality is, and it would be, if these big governments would hire people at $15 an hour, that the economy would still continue to grow. In fact, it would probably grow more so, because now I can spend more and help that economy go. So I think from a democratic perspective is that let's get the fair share to the people. Let's not gorge it up here with all the people that have the billions and millions, and then let's pay the minimum wage to the people, $10, and then we're still living in poverty. Let's share that benefit. We're after all, the people are working to to build you, and let's share that stuff. And I really think that as you share that, the economy will be much better.
I think you both bring up great points. And speaking to what Sione was saying, free market capitalism. That's the economic approach by the Republican Party versus the social economic of the Democrats. I think it's important to know the differences between the two, and you bring up a great point. Here's a really interesting thing about free market capitalism. The vaccine right now, because this is a hot topic, COVID, we have a vaccine in warp speed, and it's a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a because of free market capitalism,
it's market driven.
We're going to get this vaccine at
Supply
a
and
faster
demand.
time, and that's what the American people want to address, COVID.
Well, I don't even think it's just America. It's all like, it's not even like anything to any other countries, but America's kind of been in the lead for a long time. And so even in medicine, I feel like it's not just America, but the whole world is kind of waiting on us to find the vaccine.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they all know that. So it's like, I think it's like how you said, it's kind of an amazing feat that we're kind of blazing past this as fast as we are. Because what was it, like AIDS back in the day, like it took them something like 7 to 9 years to come out with a vaccine. And so this is even a year. I know that there's people dying and still suffering, and the economy's all jacked up. But if you look at the history of how we've dealt with worldwide pandemics, we're doing pretty good. Like, I don't think it's too bad. So just to your point on that,
you have your top pharmaceutical companies, because of free market capitalism, they are competing to come up with that vaccine, and that's one of the benefits of free market capitalism. It's driven by supply and demand. To speak to what Fahina was saying, I think there's a danger, and at least from my point of view, of raising our minimum wage to such a high, it's all basically doubling our minimum wage. That's going to hurt the small businesses the most. So you raise your minimum wage, you decrease, you let people go from work, and so you have less people employed. The unemployment rate is affected. But then here's one important thing that I think some people fail to understand, and I think business owners can understand this. As a business owner, you take on the responsibility of taking care of your employees as well as the company itself. So, let's say John Doe, he gets fired or he decides to find a new job. This company goes under. He gets to walk away as an employee and finds another job. He doesn't take upon himself the burden of the business owner. The business owner has to, if it's gone under, if he's gone bankrupt, he takes on the sole responsibility, financial responsibility of that business, whereas the employee doesn't. And so those are some important things to think about. And I'd like to see the minimum wage increased. With doubling it, that's something I'd be concerned about, because then you're taxing and you're laying a heavy burden on especially the small business owner.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, so you're looking at McDonald's and all these fast food, really that's where it hurts the economy the most, this entry level. So if you go to McDonald's now, you see these little kiosks, right? So you go in and you just punch. That really is a product of minimum wages being raised up. So the challenge is that, again, it's a market-driven. I'm a small business, and if someone comes from the outside and says, "Hey, you need to pay this amount," basically they're dictating to me my profit margins and all my expenses, and a lot of companies can't afford that, and so that is the challenge. I'd love to see it at 15, but I want to see it at 15 because the market's driven it to 15, and not because
Sure.
it was just dictated by someone at DC and said, okay, now we're going to put it at 15. There will be repercussions in that financially, So, I mean, it's like, if we just jump the gas and said, okay, gas is now $5, it'll affect it.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is like if you listen to both sides of the parties, like, and two people here representing both sides of the party, it's kind of like the idea that all of us kind of want the same thing.
Mhm.
We just have different ideas about how to get
How to
there,
get there.
And so, and I think for a lot of these young people, the only reason I say this because I feel like a lot of us who have been involved in politics, we've heard that before. Like we all kind of know that. But I think for a lot of these young kids, especially like for me, this is my first time voting. But that was because I was, on the little rock of Tonga on my mission, when President Trump got elected, and all I remember was flying back on the plane and hearing all these Australian women freaking out because President Trump had just become the president of the United States. So I didn't know what to expect coming home.
Was that a positive freak out or a negative freak out?
Oh, I don't know. All I knew was that this is the guy that says you're fired. Like I didn't know anything else about this guy. So, but I just was kind of like worried because about all this crazy reactions. But I guess I say this because me and many other people, this is our first time voting. So, that's where I'm like,
How
I don't.
old are you?
I'm 24.
And this is your first time voting?
But it's because I got back from my mission when I was 20, but I couldn't vote when I was in Tonga.
I see.
So this will be my first time.
Okay, so I just wanted to go back a little bit on what Muti and Wake was saying as far as the minimum wage thing, because one of the things that I see, and this may be difficult to accomplish, but it can be so if people's greed drops. Because as of now, if things change, this minimum wage stuff, we're thinking of changing it's impossible, not impossible, but it might drop everybody's small business, might affect small businesses if we increase it. But that's because we're not looking at the big picture here. We're just looking at this little small business and $15 and whatever. But we have to look at the bigger picture, the economy. Who's running the economy? What policies are in place? What policies can be changed so that when that minimum wage is raised, it positively can affect the small businesses so that businesses are, maybe they don't have to pay the taxes and have the rich people pay the taxes, or maybe make the rich people pay their due diligence, and some of that fund can go in to help support the small businesses. So there's many different. It's the innovation, it's the creativity, it's what can we do out there so that everybody can be. So there's equity. It doesn't mean that we're going to run like a communist something of the jig here, but there's equity in taking care of our people, of Americans, so that this child does not grow up in poverty and is starving over, is hungry here in America where food is like we waste like 70% of our food or 40% of our food or whatever. So it's all about being creative. It's not just taking $15 and my little business is going to shrink. No, it doesn't have to shrink. We can just get creative, and if people would look outside of themselves, especially the policymakers, people with lots of money, if they just start paying their due diligence, small businesses can thrive and help the community.
I think it's important to take our minds back to the pre-pandemic. I mean, this country, the economy was at the best it's ever been in the history of our country. With the lowest unemployment rates among all the minority groups, even women, African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians. That's you had the lowest unemployment rates. You had the lowest government dependent. People who were on food stamps, and these are people in the inner cities who were positively affected by that economy. And so, I guess I think when I hear what Fahina's saying, with our free market capitalist economy, all were benefiting. When you think of 3.5 unemployment rate, that's incredible. When were we ever at 3.5? Not in any of our lifetimes. And so I think that's something that's important to keep in mind, that all were benefiting from the economy before the pandemic set in.
Oh, thank you. That's funny. Like that wasn't even on my topic of the list, but I guess the kind of the conversation just went in that direction.
Which topic?
Yeah, but no, yeah. And so like I guess something I was gonna kind of like talk to you guys about, and I guess you kind of brought it up already, is like a huge part of this has been like the whole COVID-19 pandemic, and I guess for both of you guys, like I guess what's your guys' beliefs and standpoints on that in terms of how we're doing with the vaccines. And I guess more importantly, like this is like the main topic of this because it hasn't just been COVID-19, but I feel like it's been overemphasized over this past year. Like, what are your guys' thoughts concerning like media coverage of it, and concerning the people who are going to be watching? Like, for me personally, like when I watch the news and stuff, I feel like it can get kind of confusing about who I'm supposed to listen to. So my question to kind of both of you guys is like, how do you guys figure that out, or get your information, like, and what's it, like how you choose to act, like on a daily basis concerning COVID-19?
So when COVID-19 first came out, I was a lot more actively researching and really stayed up to date with the goings on with what our government was doing, what our hospitals were doing. I'd post on Facebook, wondering why the heck are hospitals going directly to ventilators. I mean, that was the wrong thing to do. I spent 9 years where I was training and in servicing respiratory care specialists in the hospitals, and I would be posting on Facebook, we should be using, high flow oxygen, CPAP, and for months we were using ventilators. We're now looking back and realizing that that was the wrong move to take, putting patients on ventilators. Today, when you go to a hospital and you see COVID patients, their goal for the last few months, several months, has been to keep patients off the ventilator using high flow oxygen and CPAP, and it's exactly what and I'm not saying that to toot my horn, but I was just wondering who was recommending that. Of course, it's I guess Dr. Fauci and our medical team, but we're now looking back. Hindsight's 2020. That was the wrong approach, and I think thousands, tens of thousands of people died because of that approach. I think we spoke to the vaccine, but we see the current spike, the high number of cases here in Utah, the high, we see hospitalizations. But when you look at the data, the percentage of patients being hospitalized, the ratio of those who are getting the new cases versus hospitalizations has been really decreasing. And yet, I don't say that to minimize what we're going through, because we're going through something that we haven't faced in our lifetime, something that we haven't faced since probably the Spanish flu, and so I think, and I'm sure if I might disagree, but I think Trump has done a great job.
Yeah, you're right. I do
He's
disagree.
done a great job because, yeah. So, was just giving an introduction to. So for me, you know, you look at the fact that China had kept this from being released to the public for 2 months. During those 2 months, you had over 5 million residents from Wuhan traveling to foreign countries, but were banned from traveling within their own country of China. Out of those 5 million, you had over 400,000 people from Wuhan that traveled to America. So we had 2 months. We didn't know until the end of December. We were tipped off to what was going on. That's when China first came out with it, and Trump enforced the travel ban in January.
Even though they still had
January
people
31st.
travel back and forth.
And that was even some of the Republicans didn't agree with him, and yet you think about it, how much more we would have, how many more cases we would have had to deal with without that ban. But also, we didn't take into account the 2 months that we had the virus here already spreading, and we reportedly had a record flu season, and I think some of those flu cases might have been COVID. Now that we look back, and that's the thought now, is that some of those early flu cases might have been COVID, actual COVID cases.
Yeah, actually, I have a brother-in-law who had that like back in February. We all flew out to California, and he decided he was going to skip out on the trip, and I was like, what?
Sure.
What happened? He's like, feel sick. I was like, stop being a little girl, let's go. But then, come to find out, we were like, it might have been COVID. Like, because like you said, it was here for who knows how long.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point. We didn't know that it was here this whole time.
And but Trump knew a little bit earlier than most of us, and he chose to keep that to himself. So basically, as far as COVID, as far as I'm concerned, I have no trust, no faith in anything that person says. So I don't trust anything he says. He lies. He tries to make himself look good. For me, it almost seems like he's just, trying to push himself, whatever it is, just I'm the best, you gotta like me, all that kind of stuff. But I really think that for me, I think as far as COVID, I trust the scientists, the doctors, and even though they make mistakes, I gotta give it to them. They're on a time kind of a thing. They were trying to hurry. You talk about, we found for the Chinese flu, it took 9 years to find whatever. There's pressure on these people because of the rate of death that's going up and cases that's going up so fast and so quickly. There's pressure on these folks, and so they've got to, so try to find something as fast and as soon as possible, and especially when we have a leader that's saying, yeah, we're going to get it here in a couple weeks, by the end of this month, at the end of this year, we're going to have it. And then you hear the scientists, and they're like, well, maybe in January and February. It was like, okay, who do I listen to? There's conflicting messages. So I choose to listen to the scientists, and even though they will make mistakes, because hey, they're doing their best, but they let us know, okay, that was wrong, let's do this, let's try this stuff here. But I just got to give it to them. I got to give them credit, they're up there. But one of the things that I'm thinking of, when that vaccine comes out, I'm going to try my best not to, I don't know, maybe people will want to try, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to be no guinea pig.
Yeah. You bring up a great
and what I really
great
think,
point, because you have certain leaders who are pressing to enforce vaccinations, and this vaccine, and that's something that I see the Republicans are fighting against, to allow us the freedom to choose. We don't have to choose whether we get a flu vaccine or not. And I think, like you, I don't want to be a guinea pig for a vaccine.
And I really think that the focus, myself, I think the focus is going to be on poor people, people of color, women. I think that's going to be the big push to be the guinea pigs. And if we're not aware of that, we're going to be victims. I mean, somebody's got to be a victim to see if the stuff works.
Sure.
Why don't they try it on dogs or something?
Careful, you might anger the animal activists.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Like the ones protesting outside like a Chick-fil-A or
Yeah,
Whole
yeah,
Foods.
yeah. Okay, yeah,
Like-
that's true.
But
Rabbits.
Fahina brought up, that Trump knew, and, Trump didn't want to panic the country, and I saw Biden the other day at a rally, and he was talking about that, and Biden was saying something to the effect that, we're Americans, we don't panic, but then I instantly thought of the toilet paper
Panic.
panic. I mean, can you imagine if Trump had let out the full scope of things? I mean, we couldn't buy any disinfectants. We couldn't buy any toilet paper. People were, on social media asking others for toilet paper. I mean, even paper towels and tissues were gone because anything that had paper on it,
Yeah, I saw a paper towel going for $45 on KSL, and I was like, "Are you
So-
serious?
But
I should have
I-
invested a
But
long
I'm
time
So
ago."
thinking
to
that-
my point, I mean, yeah, we do panic, and we saw. I had never seen America panic like that, and I thought it was just Utah, and
It's
thank
all-
goodness I had just bought a big family pack the Saturday before, and so I was able to last, through that whole.
But I think there's some panics
period.
that's different from other panics. Like that information could have probably saved 100,000 people. Just the basic wearing of mask. I mean, to think, and I know to even today, like some people don't think the wearing of the mask is that, but when you talk to the scientists, it has actually helped. If they had gotten to wear the mask sooner, there could have been over 100,000 people that would have not have caught it. So from what they have,
The
so-
interesting thing that when you look at other countries, there's countries in Europe, they never did that. They went to herdsman immunity.
right,
Yeah,
because you want to
herd
know
immunity.
why? Because they went, like in those countries that did not have the
Sweden.
high rate, they went in and they did like some really heavy duty attack on the COVID, like having people tested. They were having the people tested. They were having people taking different things that we did not do until like it was too late. So a lot of the countries that were not hit as heavily as ours got on top of things as soon as they heard it to take care of the country.
Well, and I think it's important to remember too how many people were going to those countries traveling, from Wuhan, and America was one of the most affected by those tourists or businessmen who were coming into our through California and New York, where they were mostly affected. And like I said, there's something to say about the fact that you had a 2-month period where people were traveling, and yet there was a ban by the president of China for these Chinese in Wuhan traveling inside the country, and yet allowing them to travel abroad. As far as I mean, we talk about the mask and social distancing. I think those were progressing along the way as we were learning more about the virus. Because at the initial stages, we were going back and forth. The masks help, the
Only
masks
the
aren't
Republicans.
helping. Well, these are Dr. Fauci's.
Just kidding.
These are Dr. Fauci's. When we talk about the science. Yeah, that's right. and I'm guilty because I mean, and Fahina knows. I've been wearing, when I go in the hospitals, I wear a mask, and often, and so I'm very opinionated when it comes to masks, because I understand masks, and I understand virology, the study of viruses, And so to me, I have my own opinions. But going back to what I was saying, you had Dr. Fauci who was wavering on mask wearing, not mask wearing, and so those steps of trying to prevent the virus from spreading, I think they were evolving with time as we were learning more about this virus. Because remember, no president has dealt with a virus like this since the Spanish flu. We're learning as we're going along, and I think people make the mistake of thinking, well, we all should have known what this virus was about, what we needed to do, which I think is, it's not only it's not only an unfair criticism of our leaders. I think it's also with the science, those who are providing the science, because, like I said, they were evolving along the way with this virus as well. Okay. As they were learning more, their decisions were evolving. So
yeah, I think that's very true. Like people keep saying, like, I guess one thing before we kind of move on, because we got to kind of wrap up here, but
sure.
Yeah, one thing that people say a lot is the science. I think that there's just science, because data changes over time, and so I feel like people need to kind of like adapt to what science comes in and try their best to follow it, but not use that as like a means of attacking somebody else, because that science might be outdated by tomorrow. It's the idea that it's like, okay, well, we're all trying to figure this out together.
It's a progress. I mean, it's a process. I mean.
So sorry, we have like this little kava bowl. I put like a little piece of paper. Sorry, there's no kava, but so I'll just throw these out. But we'll have one of you, like both of you guys, just have a question. I don't know which one. I wrote 4 questions that we were gonna discuss. Sorry, I was like backing off of the mic, but I guess want you guys to read your question, and then we'll give you guys both a chance to kind of like talk a little bit about it.
Let's get Vaina.
Okay.
Mine's about guns.
I have a funny one. How do you keep yourself informed? Fox News, CNN. Who should the people trust?
Sorry, I guess I kind of already talked a little bit about that, but go ahead.
You? What's really funny is I go back and forth. But I mostly listen to CNN more than I do Fox. But I go back and forth just to see the differences. I'm just amazed at how, so they both are not the same story. Fox tells one story and CNN tells another story. So who do you trust? It's whoever you want to trust, because you don't know the truth. They all lie.
Do you think that there's a way for people to like find the truth though?
I think there has to be a way. I mean, there must be some way for people to. I mean, I think you could take the general whatever is being shared and kind of take the far parts away, and then kind of what is the general information, and just maybe just stick to that and don't believe everything. But it's just unfortunate. For me, I think it's unfortunate. And then I listen to the radio too and stuff like that. But it's just unfortunate that we can't really get some real, some real news that is, one talks about the other one's fake news, and then the other one talks about the other one's fake news, and so. But I think the other thing is numbers, and then that's the other thing. If you get data, if some of the thing he shares data, I kind of tend to want to believe that. But then of course they can also tweak data, to fit their story. So you just never know. But
here's one of those things that just kind of chime into what you're saying. You say we all have our right to our own opinions,
mm-hmm.
but we don't have a right to our own truths. That's the biggest issue right now. If you look at social media and dilemma, what happens is, like, if I'm left-leaning, social media will give me all the stuff that's left-leaning.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a Republican, all the stuff I'm going to get and they could care less about truth. And
right.
So this kind of goes again to what we're talking about, how do we get the truth? And is truth important? Because here's the thing, if we both settle on the fact that whether you're on the left or on the right, whatever they give me I'm going to accept, then the reality is nobody has the truth. And we continue down a false road that ends up at a dead end.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the critical piece. Are people ready to accept the truth? Am I ready to accept the truth that that Biden's actually a good guy? All these kinds of things. Am I biased towards Biden? My point is that we have to be willing to accept truth, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
and I think it kind of boils, it kind of boils down, like you said, it kind of boils down to your own values, whatever your values are, and and you can see things working, and sometimes you can even see it from people. Just what are their values? What do they stand for? When they speak it in, like some of the presidential debates, some of the government, other Senate debates or whatever the other debates are that have gone. You can kind of sometimes tell just by looking at them, what they say, how they say it.
I think they call that profiling.
Yeah, well, because what really comes out of your mouth is what's in your head.
Well,
that's your values. That's coming out of your mouth.
Because there's the biblical term. What does it say? It's like, by your fruits you shall know them.
Exactly.
Like, it's the whole, yeah. And I agree with that.
And so I think that's one of the things that you can tell is that who is going to really, and for me it's about who's really going to love the people, who really cares about the American people, who really wants to be there beside the American people, to have, share their pain, feel their pain, help put policy into place to make sure that everything is okay as much as they can, to help as many Americans as possible. So
I think it's important. I mean, I love, like Fahina said, I love politics. I can, just sit all day and every day, and someday I'm going to be a millionaire, and then I can just stay at home and just read politics.
Or you can run for president.
Because I love researching, and Fahina brings up a really important point. That's the sad truth. Journalism today is very biased, and whether it's Fox News or CNN, they're going to tell their truth. I think we need to take it upon ourselves. If the truth is that important to us, I love doing research, and so I do a lot of research, and I like to formulate my own ideas, my own beliefs, and so I know Fahina's all about, that's as long as I've known her, she's been that way, caring about the people, and like I mentioned, when I first met her, I went up there, I applied to medical school, and I wanted to go up there and give the administrators there a face with the application, the name on the application. So I went up there and I ran into Fahina, and so Fahina helped me, introduce me to people I needed to meet, and so when she talks about helping people, I know she means it, and I think she's done a lot of great things for our people. And that's one thing in saying that, with the Republican Party, you think of our current issues with the blacks, the black community. That is a very hot topic right now. Whether we're discussing gun rights right here, which the Republicans stand to protect, because the Republicans, we're conservatives. We want, like I mentioned, we want to conserve. The definition that I gave, to protect something important from harm or destruction. We're conservatives. The Republicans, we want to conserve our traditional ways, our core values, our American core values, the conservative values, the traditions that we had. And that includes the Constitution. And this falls right in line with the Second Amendment.
Sorry, would you mind reading the question?
Yeah, the question is, are you pro-gun? Why or why not? I am pro-gun. It's our constitutional right. We have the right to arm ourselves, to defend ourselves. And that Constitution, I'm reading a book right now called the Federalist Papers. And I'll tell you, it's an incredible book. And it speaks to, it has three of our founding fathers who wrote the book, and it has to do with the Constitution, the Philadelphia Convention of 1797 to ratify the Constitution with the 13 original unions that became states to form the new country of America. And that's something I didn't really fully grasp until I started reading this book, that America didn't become America in 1776 when we won the Revolutionary War. America became America once we ratified the Constitution and it became a country when we ratified the Constitution. Then you read that whole history of our Constitution, and I think with, not to be biased, but with the LDS people, we know how inspired those men were. Our founding fathers were properly positioned and were inspired to write that Constitution. And I talk to my boys about it because they come home with new questions from school every day, and we talk about the Constitution. I tell them, listen, you believe in a perfect God. Does anything come from a perfect God that's imperfect? Something that's like the Constitution, we believe that was divinely inspired of God. That was his Constitution, and we're told that in Doctrine and Covenants. So who is trying to change the Constitution and who isn't? We see our gun laws, being even our First Amendment rights, but in sticking to this Second Amendment right, our constitutional right to bear arms, why change something that was divinely inspired? I think if God would have wanted it any other way, we would have seen it in the Constitution. But again, that's a biased, religious, biased point of view. But in sticking to a political, let's say we strip all our guns. Do you think the gangs out here are gonna decrease with the violence? And I think they would increase. Actually, that's my belief, because they know that we're not armed.
They're not law-abiding.
And you see it now in New York, all these states where they've been having, Chicago, where crime has just skyrocketed because of defunding of police. This current movement to defund or abolish police. Police are resigning. You had in New York where a whole squad was released by the mayor. And guess what happened in New York? Crime, shooting, homicides just skyrocketed. So imagine if we strip our guns or we minimize our right to bear arms. What's going to happen? We become a victim to those who want to enforce their will.
Oh, awesome. I think that's great. Sorry, and then I'll turn the last little couple minutes over to you. What do you think? Are you pro-gun? Why or why not?
Oh, pro-gun. I kind of take the democratic approach to gun, where I think gun is good for people. I think it's their right to bear arms, but I think there also needs to be regulations so that people like gangs and people that have history of violence and things like that, they have to pass some kind of a regulation so that we're handing guns to people that are sane and that can be controlled. So other than that, I think people have the right to bear guns, but they need to have regulations to make sure to protect other people.
I do think there should be some improvements with regulations, where you're having interstate, information sharing. There are a lot of things.
Yeah.
There are some things that we can do, but it is such a hot topic because we have, you have Kamala Harris, who openly stated, if she were made president, and this is, of course, while she was running for president. She was one of the Democratic nominees. But, you know, I mean, even though she's vice president, she still carries those beliefs, where she stated, you know, she would give Congress 100 days to get rid of guns, or she would enact
Yeah, I think that's a little extreme.
executive
personally.
order, which she doesn't have the right.
Yeah,
She
that's it.
doesn't have the right to solely change her constitution, and I don't know if, you know, she's aware of that. I'm sure she is. She's been in D.C. long enough to know that she herself can change the Constitution.
But here's the thing, this is again the dishonesty. A lot of people, they can say that because they know they can't do it, but there's a small population that they'll help.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
so even
because
though
they don't
know-
understand that.
Right, even though they know, she knows it'll never happen, but she knows that there are people that she's talking to that she'll buy.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the problem with politics in general, is that there's so much lying going on, and you have to decipher what's true, what's not true, and then come out with, you know, some reasonableness to your values and what you believe.
Sure.
Otherwise, we're just, you know, we're believing a bunch of lies.
Well, I think a big part of that is because, like, recently, like, you know, like, I've always liked guns and stuff like that. I've been through the process and stuff like, I don't know, have either of you been through the process of, like, purchasing a firearm?
Mhm.
So it's, like, there's a process to it, like, you know, and I feel like there's a lot of Americans who have never purchased a firearm. So you can tell them one thing and they actually just don't know. I think, like, what you're talking about is, you know, inform yourself. Go out there and try it. You know, try and get a gun and see how hard it is. There was actually, funny enough, I don't want to talk too much, but there was a reporter. She was like, I'm gonna prove to you guys, like, she was like videoing live, I think, and she's like, I'm gonna prove to you guys how easy it is to get a gun. And she walked into a store and they denied her. And then she walked into a second store and they denied her. And then a third store and they denied her. And so she asked, and they were like, well, you have a history of domestic violence against your boyfriend and you can't have a gun. And I was like, that's exactly what we're talking about. If people are following the actual laws, which in a lot of cases gang members and stuff don't, you know, there are laws and regulations that kind of hold back on that. But, you know, I think that there's a lot of concern where people are like, hear things, but they've never actually tried it before, and so they believe it.
And they've got to do some testing on those things, because sometimes some of those gun stores just, you know, don't really check in, and they.
Yeah, sell
But
them.
anyway, but I wanted to touch on something real quick, Kuna, before you
go for
end
it.
up, that I didn't get to touch on earlier, that Mo talked a little bit about, as far as the abortion and the LGBT
Yes.
you know, as far as.
LGBT.
Yeah.
Is it or
LGBTQ.
Right.
They're just gonna keep adding letters. Sorry, I hope I didn't offend anybody, but I'm just saying.
Anyways, so I wanted to touch on that because from my perspective, what I feel about that is that even though, like, you know, even though it was kind of like, you know, like Mo mentioned, I myself, you know, don't believe in abortion, and I don't feel that it's right to have but that's my own personal thoughts. But as far as allowing people to use their free agency to do what it is that to let them have their choice and things, that's something that that's where I draw the line, where I don't tell you what to do. You know, if you think you need an abortion or whatever, you know, I'm not going to put something in place to force you to have that child because you were raped. I'm not going to force you not to be with the person that you feel like you love because, you know, put some law and stuff like that. So that's where I kind of draw the line, where I can have my thoughts and my beliefs and my things, but I feel that free agency to choose is much more important than I mean, after all, I mean, if we look back at if we're looking at the LDS perspective of things, why was Satan kicked out? Because he wanted to force everybody to do good. Hello?
Yeah.
You know, I was like,
So,
no, you get to choose.
I'd like to say something about that. So I think it's important to go back and look at Roe versus Wade and what it was about, and the original ruling with advice by our Supreme Court. You know, at the time in '69 when I think her name was Norma McCorvey, and they named her Jane Doe, and she was living in Texas at the time, got pregnant with her third child, and wanted to abort, but she wasn't able to, because in Texas at the time, like almost, I believe all other states, the only reasonable cause for abortion was if it was life-threatening for mom. And in this case, it wasn't, and so that was the case, Roe versus Wade. And so, the Supreme Court ruled on it, 7-2, okay? But they also, because at the time, again, states were only allowing abortions if it was life-threatening to mom. The Supreme Court gave the advice that yes, women have the right to make that decision. However, they also gave the advice that states, these local states and governments, they have to look at their interests and protect the neonate as well. And at the time, the first trimester, because they looked at the 3 trimesters. The first trimester, a mom could make that decision. Second trimester, they had to have some kind of health issue to abort the child. Third trimester, that was really unheard of. It was absolutely a no. They had the right, but states, the Supreme Court ruled, giving advice as to how they can, judge each situation. But today this is where it's difficult for me, because I work in the market of labor and delivery, and have been for the past almost 11 years now. And so we're in the business of keeping babies alive. And, even during medical school, that was one of the fields I was thinking about going into. And, and I've seen where these babies are born and live for about a couple hours and then pass. And it really, I really stand for and I think Republicans do feel this way. We stand for women's rights, but when you see the current narrative and the current agenda to push for late-term abortions, that's where I just I say no, because these babies are alive and well, and so you're aborting these babies. You're basically killing these babies when they are at a point to survive and live. That's where I draw the line, But I rather than aborting, I wish our leaders would push more preventive and support preventive measures, because we're basically, you look at the black community again, where you're having 1,000 abortions, daily.
I think it was 2018, they had more black babies that were aborted than born in that year.
Yeah. So anyway.
But yeah, it's a touchy subject, and I feel like, again, it's both sides trying to find the right way, or a way that kind of is a middle ground for everybody. So anyway, thank you, Muti, and thank you, Fahina, for joining us on the podcast. And it sounds like you guys have a lot more you guys want to say, so maybe we'll have you guys come back. Yeah. So maybe we'll have another episode. But
I really love. Fahina's been such a. I've always been so grateful for her. I'm where I'm at today because of certain people that crossed my path, and she's definitely one of them.
Yeah, he's just a smart dude. I'm sitting here listening, and I'm like, I did not realize you were so into politics. That is great.
No, but yeah, hey, and for everybody that's tuning in, thank you guys for listening. We'll be doing another podcast, and we'll post it up soon. I think this podcast will go up, I believe, on the 29th. But by the time you hear this, I think it'll be that day, so I don't think that matters too much. But tune in again. We'll have a couple more podcasts. This is Talakeiola tuning out.